Today, we're going to work on our solving rational equations foldable. We've got this. First, you should have your foldable in front of you. And we're just going to work through each one of these examples. The first one, or the first set, is using cross products. If you have a fraction equals a fraction, you can simply cross multiply. So I can multiply the 8 times the x minus 3 and the 3 times the x plus 7. At this point, I can now take my pen and I can distribute the 8 to the x and the 8 to the 3, this 3 to the x, and this 3 to the 7. And that will give me 8x minus 24 equals 3x plus 21. Now I want to gather all my variables to one side and my constant to the other. Here I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides and add 24. That will give me 5x equal to 45. I divide by 5 and I find out that x is 9. Before I say for sure that this is the answer, I do have to double check it with the original problem and make sure that substituting 9 in for the x won't cause either one of these fractions to become undefined. And it doesn't. So I'm good to go. Over here, again, I'm going to multiply the negative 3 times the 3x minus 7 and the x times x minus 5. From here, I'm going to need to distribute the x, and then I'm going to distribute the negative 3. Don't forget that negative. So that you wind up with x squared minus 5x is equal to negative 9x plus 21. We're going to move all the terms to the left-hand side. So I'm going to add 9x and subtract 21 and set the equation equal to 0. I now have a quadratic instead of a linear. In order to solve this quadratic, I'm going to see if it will simply factor, and it does. Factors of negative 21 that add to positive 4 are 7 and negative 3. So x plus 7, x minus 3 are my factors. I set each factor equal to 0 using the zero product rule, and I find that x will be equal to negative 7 or x will be equal to 3. Again, I do a quick check. 3 will be okay and negative 7 will be okay, and that it won't cause it to become undefined. Continuing on with example 2, multiplying by the least common denominator. So if I look over here at A, my least common denominator is x plus 7. So I'm going to multiply everything by x plus 7. Now remember that when I say multiply everything, that means that I'm going to have to take this whole thing and multiply it here by the negative 3 and all the way over here. Now the nice thing is when I multiply x plus 7 times x over x plus 7, notice these guys will cancel. Convenient, right? So those cancel, and that'll leave me with just the x. When I multiply x plus 7 times the negative 3, I'll distribute the negative 3 and get negative 3x minus 21. And finally, when I multiply this term, I'm going to get the x's to cancel again. So here, all set up. Now I'm going to distribute the negative 3. Make sure that you distribute the negative. And you wind up with x minus 3x minus 21 equals negative 1. Add 1 to both sides. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Oh, and up here, by the way, I combined my x minus 3x. You don't have an x squared. And now I've got x plus 10, and I wind up with x is equal to negative 10. A quick look, negative 10 works just fine. On this side, my least common denominator is x minus 8. So I'm going to take the x minus 8 and distribute it. Multiplying here, it just cancels. Here, I'm going to have x times x, which is x squared, and then minus 8x, and then the x minus 8's cancel again. Now, this is going to be a quadratic, so I'm going to need to get everything onto the left-hand side and set the whole equation equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 7, and I'm also going to move the x squared up front. I'm going to put it in standard form. So x squared minus the 8x, and then the negative 2 minus 7 is where I got the negative 9, equals 0. I'm going to factor this. Factors of negative 9 that add to negative 8 are negative 9 and negative 1. Oops, negative 9 and positive 1. I'm going to do this. Boop, boop, right? So we get negative 9x plus an x, and then we get a negative 9. Now when I subtract, whoops, fix this all the way through here, I have x minus 9 is equal to 0, x plus 1 is equal to 0, and solving, I wind up with x equals 9 or x equals negative 1. And again, I look up here, 9 will be okay, and negative 1 will be okay. Right? Again, if you need to, if you're filling yours out at home because you're either not coming into school for whatever reason, or you missed school due to an activity, make sure that you're filling in your foldable so you have something to study from. Finally, we're going to factor to find the LCD. We're still going to multiply by the least common denominator, but here we've got to work a little harder because we have x squared minus 4 and x plus 2. So I'm going to factor the x squared minus 4 to x plus 2x minus 2. The denominator underneath the 3 is just x plus 2. When I take a look at that, I notice that the least common denominator will be x plus 2 times x minus 2. Here's my least common denominator. They both have an x plus 2. Check. I also need the x minus 2. Now, when I multiply this, I'm going to take this whole thing. I'm going to take all of this, and I'm going to multiply it by this term. Well, that's going to be convenient because the entire denominator is going to cancel. So that's great. Now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn around and multiply it by this fraction. And here, the x plus 2's will cancel. So I'm going to have 3 times x minus 2. I distribute the 3, and I get 3x minus 6. I'm going to add the 6. Okay? And I'm subtracting an x from both sides. Then I'm going to divide by 2, and x is equal to 6. 6 is fine. It works. And if I plug it in, I'll get that it's equal. This is 3/8. This winds up being 12 over 6 minus 4. It's 32, which reduces to the same thing. On this side, I have to factor again, and I can be pretty sure, hopefully, that it's going to have an x plus 3 in it. So when I factor it, I get x plus 3, x plus 9 for this denominator. Now I'm going to multiply everything through, and I have to multiply it by each term. When I multiply by this first term, x plus 3 times x plus 9 times 1 over x plus 3, just the x plus 3's go away, and I'm left with the x plus 9. So notice there's my x plus 9. Now I'm going to multiply this whole thing by the 2, and here I'm going to get 2 times x plus 3 times x plus 9, the whole thing out. Then I'm going to have my equals, and now I'm going to multiply x plus 3 times x plus 9 times this term. And this is where it gets to be very nice because x plus 3 cancels with x plus 3, x plus 9 with x plus 9, and I'm left with the x squared minus 3. Now, this left-hand side, I need to FOIL and distribute the 2. So first I FOIL, then I distribute the 2. Now I'm going to combine my like terms. Okay, 2x squared. I've got an x and an x, which is 25x, a 9, and a 54, which is 63. Now, once I've got the left-hand side completely simplified, I'm going to subtract the x squared and add the 3. Then I'm going to factor, and then I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. And voila, x is equal to negative 22, or x is equal to 3. And again, if I plug those in up here, that works. I'll leave it there for a moment so that you can pause your video. Right, that is it for your foldable.